Okay, so today we're diving into something that's, I think, on everyone's mind these days, which is, how to lead, how to be an effective leader in this age of AI.
Yeah, it's a really timely topic for sure.
Yeah, and to kind of anchor our deep dive today, we're going to be looking at this essay, Leadership Skills in an AI Workplace, What Works and What Does Not by Jörg-Owe.
Okay, yeah. Sounds like a good one.
Yeah, so I think our mission here today, for our listeners is really to figure out like what are the must-have leadership qualities, as AI just becomes more and more integrated into the workplace.
Right. So you're listening to this and you really want to be a great leader now and as things change, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
So we're going to kind of like pull out, what we think are the most important insights from this essay and kind of like try to give everyone listening a framework.
A framework for thinking about how to lead in the future.
Exactly. So maybe we can start with, what are some of the key leadership skills that Schneppet really emphasizes as being crucial in an AI-driven environment?
Well, one of the biggest ones, and this is probably no surprise, is emotional intelligence.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And the essay actually points out that 90% of top performers have high EI.
Wow, 90%, that's huge.
Yeah. It's a pretty significant number. And I think, as we rely more and more on technology, the human element of leadership is only going to become even more important.
So, like even more so than now.
Yeah, I think so. Because AI can handle a lot of the, data analysis and routine tasks. Leaders are going to have to be even better at the things that AI can't do, like understanding their teams, building relationships, motivating people.
Yeah, all that good stuff.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And Schneppet even mentioned this Capgemini survey, I think it was from a couple of years ago, where they found that 74% of executives see emotional intelligence as like a must-have skill.
Okay, so this is not just like, a nice to have. This is essential.
Exactly. And they're even predicting that the demand for emotional intelligence is going to increase like sixfold in the coming years.
Wow, sixfold. That's pretty wild.
Yeah. So it's definitely something for leaders to be paying attention to, developing that emotional intelligence, becoming really good at those interpersonal skills.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So another key skill that Schneppet talks about is adaptability. Why is that so important in this context of AI?
Well, I mean, think about it. The world of AI is constantly changing. Like new advancements are happening all the time. So leaders have got to be able to keep up with that pace of change.
So you're saying it's not enough to just accept change. You actually have to like thrive in it.
Exactly. You have to embrace it. You have to be able to adjust your strategies, try new things, maybe even like abandon old ways of doing things that are no longer relevant.
Yeah. So it's not just like tolerating change, but actually seeking it out.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is having a growth mindset, being open to learning new things, seeing challenges as opportunities to grow.
Yeah. So it's not like, oh, this new AI tool is messing up my workflow. It's like, okay, how can I use this to actually improve what I'm doing?
Right. And Schneppet talks about some really good strategies for building that adaptability, like encouraging cross-functional collaboration, breaking down those silos between departments.
Okay, interesting.
And also just like reframing challenges, instead of seeing them as obstacles, looking at them as learning experiences, as development opportunities.
That's a good way to look at it. So we've got emotional intelligence, we've got adaptability. What other key leadership skills are we looking at here?
Well, Schneppet also talks about strategic thinking. And I think this one's really important because, AI, it's a powerful tool.
Yeah.
But you've got to know how to use it effectively,
Right. You've got to have a plan.
Exactly. So strategic thinking in this context, it's about being able to really analyze the AI landscape, understanding its capabilities, but also its limitations.
So it's not just enough to know like, oh, this AI can do X, Y, and Z.
Right. You've got to think about how that aligns with your overall goals.
Mm-hmm.
What are you trying to achieve as an organization? And then how can AI help you get there?
And that kind of leads into the next skill, which is team management and collaboration, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you've got to be able to lead your team in a way that takes advantage of AI's capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, recognizing that AI is not a replacement for human beings.
Right. So how do you balance those two things? Like, how do you kind of like leverage AI, but still maintain that human connection within your team?
Well, Schneppet talks about the importance of having a really good understanding of how AI is being integrated into the organization's processes.
Okay, so you've got to be aware of that.
Yeah. And then, once you have that understanding, you can start to think about how to structure your team, how to foster collaboration, how to make sure that everybody is on the same page.
So it's kind of like understanding AI's role so that then you can determine the best way to kind of fit humans in alongside it.
Exactly. And I think diversity is a big part of that, having people with different perspectives, different skill sets, different backgrounds.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've talked about a lot of really important skills, but one that I think is especially crucial when we're talking about AI is ethical judgment.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Snepat, he really emphasizes this idea that, AI can do a lot of amazing things.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have morals. It doesn't have ethics.
Right. It's not a human.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's up to the leaders to make sure that AI is being used in a responsible and ethical way.
So it's not just about, building AI that works. It's about building AI that works in a way that aligns with our values as humans, as a society.
Exactly. And that includes things like, making sure that AI is not being used to discriminate against certain groups of people, that it's not being used to manipulate people, that it's not being used in ways that are harmful to society.
Yeah. And that also means staying informed about the relevant regulations, right? Because this is a rapidly evolving field, like we've been saying, and the laws are trying to keep up, but it's important for leaders to be kind of ahead of that curve.
Absolutely. You've got to be aware of the legal landscape, what's allowed, what's not allowed, and even beyond the law. I think it's important to have those ethical conversations within your organization, to have a framework for making decisions about AI.
Yeah, so it's almost like, you have to think about the ethical implications of AI before you even start using it.
Right, and it's not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing conversation.
Okay, makes sense. So the last skill that Snepat talks about is continuous learning. And this is something that we've kind of been touching on throughout this conversation, but why is it so important for leaders to be committed to lifelong learning, especially in the context of AI?
Well, I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier about how rapidly the world of AI is evolving. New technologies, new advancements are coming out all the time.
So if you're not keeping up, you're going to fall behind.
Exactly. And as a leader, you need to be able to make informed decisions about AI. You need to be able to understand the potential benefits, but also the risks.
And if you're not constantly learning, you're not going to be able to do that effectively.
Right. And I think it's also important for leaders to set an example for their teams, to show that they're committed to learning, to growth, to development.
Yeah, because that kind of creates a culture of learning within the organization, right?
Exactly. And that's essential in an AI-driven workplace.
Okay. So we've talked about a lot of really important leadership skills. But of course, with any kind of big change, there are going to be challenges. So what are some of the main obstacles that Snepat's essay identifies when it comes to leading AI teams?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges, and this is something that we hear about a lot, is resistance to change.
Yeah. So people are afraid of AI.
Well, it's not necessarily fear of AI itself. I think it's more fear of the unknown. People are worried about how AI is going to impact their jobs, their livelihoods.
Yeah, those are valid concerns.
Absolutely. And I think as leaders, it's really important to address those concerns head on, to be transparent about how AI is going to be implemented, to provide training and support to employees to help them understand how AI can actually enhance their roles rather than replace them.
So it's about communicating clearly.
Exactly. Communication is key. And it's not just about communicating the what, but also the why. Why are we implementing AI? How is it going to benefit the organization? How is it going to benefit our employees?
Okay, that makes sense. So resistance to change is one big challenge. What are some others?
Well, we also talked about ethical considerations earlier, and those are a big challenge as well.
Right, because AI can raise a lot of ethical questions.
Exactly. And as leaders, we have to grapple with those questions.
Yeah.
What are the ethical implications of using AI in certain ways? What are the potential risks? How do we mitigate those risks?
And how do we make sure that AI is being used in a way that aligns with our values as an organization?
Right. And that's not always an easy question to answer.
No, it's not. And then, of course, there's the challenge of cultivating adaptability, which we also talked about as a skill. But why is it also a challenge?
Well, I think it's a challenge because it's not enough for the leader to be adaptable. You've got to create a culture of adaptability within the entire organization.
Okay, so it's kind of like it's not enough for just the leader to be flexible. The whole team needs to be flexible.
Right, and that's not always easy to do.
Yeah.
People have their own ways of doing things. They have their own routines.
And change can be difficult.
Absolutely. So as leaders, we have to be really intentional about creating an environment where people feel comfortable experimenting, where they feel safe taking risks, where they're not afraid to fail.
Yeah, it's about creating that psychological safety that we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And that's a big part of fostering adaptability.
Okay, so resistance to change, ethical considerations, cultivating adaptability, those are all big challenges. What's the last one that Schneebett talks about?
The last one is measuring success.
Oh, okay. So how do you know if your AI initiatives are actually working?
Right. And that can be tricky because it's not always clear what the metrics for success should be.
Yeah, because AI can impact so many different aspects of the organization.
Exactly. So Schneepat talks about the importance of identifying key performance indicators, or KPIs, that are specific to your AI goals.
So it's like you need to figure out what you're trying to achieve with AI, and then you need to figure out how to measure whether or not you're achieving it.
Exactly. And those KPIs could be things like, increased productivity, improved efficiency, reduced costs, higher customer satisfaction.
Okay, so those are all like measurable things.
Right. And by tracking those KPIs, you can get a sense of whether or not your AI initiatives are having the desired impact.
That makes sense. Okay, so we've talked about the skills, we've talked about the challenges. Now let's talk about solutions. What are some of the strategies that Schneepat's essay offers for effective leadership in AI-driven workplaces?
Well, one of the most important strategies is cultivating a culture of innovation.
Okay, and what does that mean exactly?
It means creating an environment where people feel encouraged to come up with new ideas, where they're not afraid to experiment, where they're rewarded for taking risks.
So it's like, it's okay to fail.
Yeah, it's more than just okay to fail. It's like failure is an opportunity to learn.
Okay, so it's like, it's not about punishing people for making mistakes. It's about learning from those mistakes and moving forward.
Exactly. And that's a big shift for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, I can imagine. And what are some other strategies for cultivating that kind of culture?
Well, Schneepat talks about the importance of encouraging curiosity. Creating an environment where people are constantly asking questions, trying to learn new things.
So it's like, it's not just about, coming up with new ideas. It's about being curious about the world around you.
Exactly. And then once you have those new ideas, you need to have a way to test them out to see if they work. So Schneepat also talks about the importance of having a process for experimentation.
Okay, so it's like you need to be able to try things out, see what works, what doesn't work.
Right. And that might mean setting up a lab or creating a pilot program or just giving people the freedom to experiment on their own.
Okay, so it's about creating that space for innovation to happen.
Exactly. And then once you have that space, you need to make sure that people have the skills they need to be successful. So Schneepat also talks about the importance of reskilling and upskilling.
Okay, so this is about making sure that employees have the training they need to work with AI.
Right. And it's not just about technical skills. It's also about things like critical thinking, problem solving, communication, collaboration.
Yeah, all those soft skills that we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. And Schneepat even suggests incorporating things like workshops and hackathons to help employees develop these skills.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's not just about like formal training programs. It's about finding creative ways to help people learn.
Right. And then, of course, once you have people with the right skills, you need to make sure that they're working together effectively. So Schneepat also talks about the importance of fostering collaboration and diversity.
Right, because AI is such a complex field. You need people with different perspectives to really be successful.
Exactly. And diversity isn't just about demographics. It's about having people with different backgrounds, different experiences, different ways of thinking.
Okay, so it's about creating that richness of thought within your team.
Exactly. And Schneepat even talks about how diversity can lead to more creative and innovative solutions.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of great strategies here: cultivating a culture of innovation, reskilling and upskilling, fostering collaboration and diversity. What's the last one?
Well, Schneepat also talks about the evolving nature of leadership roles themselves in this age of AI.
Okay. So like the way that we lead is changing.
Right. And one of the biggest changes is the emergence of new leadership positions, like the Chief AI Officer or CAIO.
Okay. And what does the CIIO do?
Well, the CII is responsible for overseeing the organization's AI strategy. They're the ones who are making sure that AI is being used in a responsible and ethical way. They're the ones who are driving innovation and making sure that AI is aligned with the organization's overall goals.
So it's like, it's a really important role.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a role that's becoming increasingly common.
Okay, so the way that we lead is changing. New leadership roles are emerging. What else does Schneepat talk about in terms of the future of leadership in the age of AI?
Well, he also talks about the importance of using case studies to learn from others' experiences.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and he actually highlights a couple of really interesting examples in his essay. One is IBM's Project Debater.
Oh, okay, I've heard of that. What is it exactly?
It's an AI system that can debate humans on complex topics.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, and IBM has used it to help leaders make more informed decisions. For example, they used it to debate the pros and cons of a new policy before they implemented it.
Okay, so it's kind of like having a really smart AI advisor.
Exactly. And it can help leaders to see things from different perspectives, to consider all of the options before they make a decision.
That's really cool. What's the other case study that Schneepat talks about?
The other one is Salesforce's Einstein Analytics.
Okay, I'm familiar with Salesforce, but what is Einstein Analytics?
It's an AI-powered analytics platform that helps businesses to make better use of their data.
So it's like it helps them to understand their customers better, to identify trends, to make predictions.
Exactly. And Salesforce has used it to improve their own sales and marketing efforts, but they've also made it available to their customers.
Okay, so it's a tool that can be used by businesses of all sizes.
Right. And it's a good example of how AI can be used to empower leaders and to help them to make better decisions.
That's great. So we've got these really compelling case studies. What else does Schneepat talk about in terms of how to be an effective leader in the age of AI?
Well, he also talks about the importance of metrics.
Okay. So how do you measure success when it comes to AI?
Right. And Schneepat identifies a few key metrics that leaders should be tracking. One is productivity levels.
Okay. So, like, is AI actually helping us to get more done?
Exactly. And another metric is workforce adaptability.
So, like, how well are our employees adapting to the changes that AI is bringing?
Right. And then the last metric is the evolution of required skills.
Okay, so, like, what new skills do our employees need to learn in order to be successful in an AI-driven workplace?
Exactly. And Schneepat argues that by tracking these metrics, organizations can get a better sense of how AI is impacting their business and how they can adjust their strategies accordingly.
That makes sense. So just to kind of like wrap things up here, what are the big takeaways from this essay? Like what do leaders really need to know about leading in the age of AI?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that AI is here to stay.
Okay, that's pretty clear at this point.
Right. And it's going to have a profound impact on the way that we work and the way that we lead.
So leaders need to be prepared for that.
Absolutely. And Schneepat's essay gives us a really good roadmap for how to do that. We talked about the importance of developing key skills like emotional intelligence, adaptability, strategic thinking, ethical judgment, continuous learning.
Right. And we also talked about the challenges that leaders are going to face, like resistance to change, ethical considerations, the need to cultivate adaptability.
Exactly. But Schneepat also offers a lot of really practical strategies for overcoming those challenges, like cultivating a culture of innovation, reskilling and upskilling, fostering collaboration and diversity.
Right. And he even provides some real-world examples of how organizations are using AI to be more successful.
Exactly. So I think this essay is a really valuable resource for any leader who wants to be successful in the age of AI.
Yeah, I agree. And on that note, maybe a final thought for our listeners, as you're kind of like reflecting on all of this, which one or two of these leadership skills that we've talked about today do you think would have the biggest impact on your ability to navigate and thrive in this evolving workplace?
That's a great question to think about.
Yeah, and if you want to dig deeper into any of this, definitely check out the essay that we've been talking about today, Leadership Skills in an AI Workplace, What Works and What Does Not, by Jörg-Owe. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.